If you're a North Korean news aficionado like me, you probably came across the NK News website well before discovering the podcast. It's an incredible source that gets you behind the headlines to give you what's probably the most reliable and evidence-based news on North Korea. Every business day, you'll get between 5 to 10 articles that provide exclusive news, detailed analysis, and informed opinions. And guess what? Each week they send you forward-looking week-ahead briefings and news alerts to keep you ahead of the curve. There's more. NK News members also get special reader-only benefits, access to exclusive events and online conferences, and perpetual access to our archive of podcasts. And here's the best part, you can get a $100 discount on your annual subscription with the code PODCAST. Redeem this podcast-only special today by visiting nknews.org/discount. That's nknews.org/discount. Hello listeners, and welcome to this, a special bumper episode, number 300 of the NK News podcast. I have recorded a heap of interviews that we've strung together. Firstly with Chad OCarroll, the founder and CEO of NK News and NK Pro and Korea Risk Group and Korea Pro. And then with Colin Zwirko and Jeongmin Kim, we talked about the parade that was held on the 70th anniversary of the signing of the Korean War Armistice, that a day that North Koreans call Victory Day. And then later on, I have groups of my colleagues from NK News cycle in and out of the studio to talk a bit about their experience working here and some of the stories that they find interesting. We hope that you'll enjoy this special bumper-length episode. Thank you very much for listening, and may there be 100, 200, 300 more episodes of the NK News podcast. Listeners, welcome to the NK News podcast. This is episode 300, can you believe it? And I'm joined by Chad OCarroll, who is all the way in Spain. Does the rain in Spain fall mainly on the plane, Chad? Or is that simply a myth?
No rain here at the moment, Jacco. It's been a scorcher every day. So I'm glad to be out of Korea in the rainy season.
Yes, right now we are absolutely up to our necks in water here. Gwanghwamun has been inundated in the last hour. When you asked me in early 2018 if I'd like to be the host of the NK News podcast, did you imagine that we'd get up to episode 300?
No, I mean, yeah, I didn't think, I don't know, it was, a bit of an experiment, right? We thought we'd see how it goes. And then, I never thought that far forward. I mean, 4 years has it been?
5 years, February 2018. And so here we are now in end of July 2023. So 5.5 years.
Yeah, time flies, eh?
It's amazing. Yeah, I'm glad. It's been a very successful experiment for me. I'm very glad with what we've achieved here, interviewing all sorts of people.
Yeah, some great episodes.
Yeah, we still haven't got Trump or Kim Jong-un yet. So we've got to keep sending out those invitations.
Yeah, must do.
Now, so for episode 300, I thought it would be fun to do a round table, but since you're in Spain, it's good to talk to you first, and then tomorrow at about 11:30, I'll be around the table in the studio, welcoming in all of our writing colleagues, our journalist crew at NK News, to come in groups of 3 for about 10 to 15 minutes at a time, and so we'll kind of cycle through all of them, try to get as many people on as we can. It won't be as much fun as episode 100, which we recorded after working hours, and so we had beers. I don't know if you remember that one. It was you, me, Ollie, and Arius, I think.
Yeah. With the North Korean wine, right?
There was wine, but there was also beer bought at the Pyeongjam downstairs. There was things got interesting.
Yeah, I think I do remember that one. Yeah, sad we can't do that this time, but maybe next time.
We'll do one soon. Did you have time to watch the parade over there in Spain? Did you see some of the highlights?
I've seen the highlights. I haven't watched the actual full feature though. Yeah, really actually enjoying having a break over the parade. I think there's been 4 or 5 parades in this pandemic era.
Right.
Pretty much every 6 months.
Yeah, that's right. They had one early February and they've had one now. And this is, of course, the big change because they brought in some foreign delegations for this one. So senior delegations from both Russia and China. I went through the whole thing, pausing every minute, making copious notes. So I've got a whole document to go through with the colleagues tomorrow. So I won't worry you too much about that. But during your time away, while you've been having a break, has there been anything on your mind about North Korea?
Yeah, I mean, I was pretty plugged in the whole time the parade stuff was taking place and the delegations going to visit. And I did find it pretty remarkable, especially to see the Russian defense minister inspecting various weapon systems at an exhibition, and obviously attending the parade as well with a Chinese senior political delegation. I guess what was striking to me was, these are two countries on the United Nations Permanent Five Security Council who actively sanctioned and condemned North Korea's nuclear and missile programs, and yet they were front and center of a parade of North Korea's most threatening ICBMs, new drone capability. So it was, I believe Ankit Panda wrote for us on NK Pro. It was a real example of how those two countries, now there's very little hope that they will play any active role in trying to turn those programs around. I really think the same is true. You can't, it's very hard to seriously expect them to really try their best on sanctions implementation and issues like that when they are more or less endorsing the very programs themselves by attending and participating in a parade like that.
Yeah, I have a vague memory. Someone can probably Google this up and correct me if I'm wrong, but that back in August of 2015, when North Korea was doing a parade for the 70th anniversary of liberation, that the Russian delegation either didn't come or threatened to not come if nukes were there in the parade. And here we are now standing there openly clapping and cheering at nuclear-tipped or potentially nuclear-tipped missiles.
Yeah, and you've got to wonder as well, what were the nature of conversations between Russia's defense minister Shoigu and the North Koreans? Don't know, but I'm wondering if there was any discussion of what's going on in Ukraine and how North Korea may be able to assist in one way or another, either through supply of munitions or missile systems, or maybe construction workers after things calm down there. Who knows?
Yeah, Russia did say, I think, express thanks through Minister Shoigu for North Korea's support. So let's see what that support materializes into. Certainly, you'll be coming back to a very interesting situation post-parade, Chad.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to coming back to work, and I've had 2 trips in short succession recently, which have meant I've not really been in the office much, and so I'm looking forward to getting back and diving into this subject just as the US ROC exercises will be starting imminently, which is going to, I'm sure, lead to various North Korean responses and hopefully no direct confrontation. But yeah, it's.
Are you still feeling, Chad, that something might happen this year in the same vein as perhaps the sinking of the Cheonan or the shelling of Yeonpyeong-do, something small but limited but shocking?
Yeah, well, I did say on Twitter just after the drone incursions in December 2022, so just a few months ago, I posted something along the lines of, I'm getting worried about the sort of growing tension between the two Koreas, the risk of miscalculation, accident, etc. And I did, I was worried that there was going to be some form of minor confrontation that could lead to some loss of life. And I remember.
Is that why you've gone to Spain? Is that your bolt hole from the Korean Peninsula, like Peter Thiel and the other billionaires have got cubby holes in New Zealand?
No, but I remember predicting back then that there was, I thought, a relatively good chance of something going pear-shaped in the first 5 months of this year, and I thought 5 months because that would be a month after the spring exercises, and I know it doesn't tend to respond directly when exercises are taking place. And on the last day of that 5-month window was the alert that was triggered in South Korea on everyone's cell phone about the rocket that was flying above.
Right, the failed satellite launch.
Yeah, and that wasn't obviously what I was expecting, but I think it was a good reminder that accidents, miscalculations, misunderstanding, miscommunication, all of those things can lead to sudden, serious escalations.
That's true.
And yeah, I hope nothing like that happens. But I think, sadly, the current trajectory of shows of force and power on each side, just seems to be pretty inevitable that something will go wrong one day when tense.
I share your fears, but also your hopes that it does, that cooler heads will prevail and that things don't get out of control. While you're there in Spain, have you been past the DPRK embassy and knocked on the door to see if you might get a welcome?
No, I'm up near Barcelona, and that's down in Madrid, so we're quite far away from the North Korean embassy. But Alejandro, if you're listening, I think Alejandro Caldebenos, who's
the
on
Leslie
the
Perez,
FBI,
to quote his full name, yes.
Yeah, he's on the FBI wanted list. He lives near Barcelona in Tarragona, I
Does
believe.
he still have that beer, that pub or cafe or whatever it was?
No, I think it's out of business now, and I don't think he would appreciate if I showed up. But
well, if you do, make sure you take a camera.
Yeah, he's not a fan of NK News, I think.
Sadly. All right. Well, thanks for joining me here, Chad. I hope you stay around and listen to the round table that I'll be doing tomorrow with our colleagues, and we'll see you back in Seoul soon.
Cheers. Thanks, Jacco. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye. Ever wondered what lies beyond the inter-Korean border? NK News brings you an opportunity to explore North Korea from a near distance. From October 8 to 17, 2023, journey with us on the second ever North Korea from a Distance tour, visiting key border locations and observatories looking into North Korea, as well as meeting key figures working on DPRK issues. Spend 2 nights on the East Coast, see the beautiful Kumgang Mountains, scour the beaches near the inter-Korean border, and see Kim Il-sung's old summer house. Visit Yeonpyeong-do, the location of the November 2010 inter-Korean artillery bombardment. Observe North Korean hamlets from close quarters in Ganghwa and delve deep into the heart of Seoul, the capital of South Korea. Every step of the way, you'll be guided by leading NK News and Koryo Tour staff and be joined regularly for multi-day portions of the itinerary by leading experts like Andrei Lankov, Chad OCarroll, Jeongmin Kim, Jacco Zwetsloot, and Gergo Vaci of Koryo Tours. As a special offer for our podcast listeners, quote podcast when making your booking for an exclusive 10% discount. Find out more at nknews.org/tour. Once again, that's nknews.org/tour and use the code podcast when booking. Let's journey into the unknown together. Okay, so this is, if you haven't already heard in the first part of the podcast, this is actually episode 300 of this series, and we're recording this now in the studio on Monday, the 31st of July, 2023. It's an amazing honor, and I'm delighted, etc., to have been recording these interviews and roundtable discussions for the last 5.5 years, or 300 episodes. Thank you to all of my colleagues at NK News, especially Chad OCarroll, for their support over this time. I'm honored to say that especially for this 300th episode, North Korea decided to throw a parade to commemorate it, which was very kind of the DPRK government, but probably an unnecessary usage of resources. I'm going to be rejoined here in the studio today by as many of my colleagues as can tear themselves away from their desks and come and talk to me about the parade or about working for NK News or about this wonderful podcast series, of course. First people in the hot seats are Colin Zwirko and Jeongmin Kim. Welcome.
Hi, Jacco.
Good morning.
How many times have you watched last Friday's broadcast of the parade in full, which was about 2 hours and 17 minutes?
Just twice.
Just once, and then scanning at my own pace many times.
I would say 1.5 then, for me.
Okay, yeah, I watched the whole thing once, but I was pausing it everywhere and then make a lot of notes there, so I got a crap ton of stuff to go through.
Me too.
Let's do it. Let's start. Here's some just some odd notes, sort of miscellaneous that I've got at the start here. Last parade, of course, in February was for the 75th anniversary of the founding of the Korean People's Army back in 1948. So this is the second parade this year, the first since the February one. And does it seem to you like when we see the parade, it's been edited, so they've spliced in video and other things, so this is not a live thing. Does it seem to you like some sound effects are added, especially every time they unfurl a flag or do a sword chop? It just feels to me like they've put in the whoo of the flag or the shing, a little bit. Do you know what I mean?
I didn't notice that.
And then when soldiers are doing like chanting, they're like huh in the recorded version as well.
I do think that they've kind of either amped those things up a little bit in the post-recording editing, or they've added that in. Anyway, that was interesting. No signs of Kim Yo-jong or Kim Joo-ae or Ri Sol-ju. Did any of them? Were they hiding behind a column or handing out an ashtray?
I couldn't see them in the parade itself, but there were other side events related to, especially the defense minister of Russia coming and Chinese delegation coming as well. And they were there, but not the daughter, right?
Not the wife and the daughter, but Kim Yo-jong made a speech at the banquet with the Chinese.
The banquet, which was after the parade, right?
Yeah.
Did I correctly identify Hyun Song-wol, was she there? Was she the one who was herding the kids and that sort of thing, and leading the people into which way to walk along the reviewing platform?
Yeah, she's still firmly Kim Jong-un's logistical top aide. And the one that started doing that last year, I've not seen her in many months. So, a bit of a mystery.
Okay, so the only woman we have there is the one who visited South Korea in early 2018.
Choi Sun-hee was also on the podium in the back. She was very visible, right behind on the podium.
Okay, but not in a...
Is she usually there, though? Choi Sun-hee in the middle VIP seat?
I think it's, she's the foreign minister, isn't she?
Yeah.
Now, there was, of course, a very prominent visit by Defense Minister, what's his first name? Sergei Shoigu. And Li Hongzhong from the Chinese Politburo were both there watching this. This is, I believe, a big deal because it's the first time that foreign representatives have been there watching potential nuclear assets rolling down Kim Il-sung Square. Is that right? Not
the first time ever, and I believe my colleague or our contributor Ankit Panda, who wrote that the 2015 parade had delegations, one from China, especially visiting on the viewing stand, watching missiles that were nuclear capable or intended to be nuclear capable. This time, there's no doubt about it. These are nuclear missiles.
Right.
And after reviewing the video, looking through it, Shoigu is saluting and very much looking very interested in all of the nuclear weapons that are rolling past him, specifically shown saluting each weapon. The Chinese visitor, the delegation leader Li, he was looking just with a straight face almost the whole time. But at the end, when the Hwasong-17 ICBM rolls past, it cuts straight to the three of them, Kim Jong-un, Shoigu, and Li, and they are all applauding. And I think there's no ambiguity to it whatsoever. The Chinese delegation leader applauded the nuclear weapons of North Korea.
What does this mean for the P5, the UN Security Council policy on North Korea denuclearization?
Well, it's not my opinion, but we've gotten a lot of feedback from experts and analysts, and basically China can write their own story still, and they're still able to kind of play the game, but no one is going to buy it any more than they already were not buying it, that China is opposed to North Korea's nuclear weapons development. People have been accusing them of allowing violations of sanctions, which they agreed to.
Yep.
They agreed at the UN, both Russia and China, to curb North Korea's nuclear weapons program back as recently as 2017. And then since then, Russia's been way more vocal about saying, maybe we should take a look at these sanctions again. But these sanctions are never going to come off. So basically, because of the US. So Russia and China are kind of going their own way. They're like, well, we're not going to totally abide by these UN sanctions that we agreed to anymore, but we're going to do it our way. And so, yes, we've heard that maybe they support it for now. Maybe they don't support North Korea going rogue and doing something with these weapons, and maybe they would prefer them not to have them. But for now, it's an asset to them.
The interest level, though, it seemed definitely a bit different. Like you said, Chinese delegation leader was looking at most of them in a straight face. And I think it was also interesting that they North Korea not only did the military parade, but they also did the Weapons Expo 2023. And only Russian delegation was shown.
Sure, but that makes sense as a military delegation
being
that's shown
true.
Around a military. I'll also add just real quick, the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson answered a question about this last Friday. And the answer was, China always, this is a paraphrase, China always abides by its commitments to the UN sanctions. And their position on the Korean Peninsula has not changed. So they're still actually playing this game where they will maybe show up at meetings later. Maybe they will, in a meeting with the US, say, oh yeah, we still support the denuclearization of North Korea. And maybe the US can say, well, we saw you applauding their nukes. You are supporting their nukes. And China can say, oh, no, we weren't. And, that's just how it's going to go.
They could also say, we sent, symbolic delegation.
Sure.
Who's like, they can always say that. But it was very clear from the optics.
You said that Li Hongzhong was looking on with a straight face. I actually made, as I said, a lot of running notes while I was watching the parade. And at 1 minute 32 seconds, when the strategic forces were marching through Kim Il-sung Square, I wrote down here, Li Hongzhong looks like he's ready for this to end.
You mean 1 hour and 32 minutes?
Yeah,
1 hour and 32 minutes into the parade there. He gave that kind of that sort of a straight smile that you give when you're not really having a great time, but you're forcing yourself to smile.
Also, when the defense minister was doing a speech, they were given like a paper.
Right, they had the script of it, didn't they? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of kind of, you can read into it what you want, but it's funny when it started, they are made to wait around for Kim Jong-un for maybe quite a while.
Right, so you've close to 20 minutes.
And Kim Jong-un walks out and gets all the adulation from the crowd. It's a very long applause, probably over 5 minutes. And they're just kind of meant to stand there and be the secondary characters as this magnanimous dictator is just soaking it all in. And that could be kind of an insult to them potentially, or maybe not. And then, then they're handed this, they actually have it in their possession, the words of the defense minister accusing the U.S. of being on the brink of starting a nuclear war, about how, nuclear war is coming. It's not a matter of if, but when. Yeah. And they're holding these words in their hands, and that's kind of a funny optics as well. But it's probably, you can brush it off.
Yeah, I have a quote from the English translation. Now, the question is not if a nuclear war will occur on the Korean Peninsula, but rather who will ignite this nuclear war and when.
Does that leave open the possibility of North Korea igniting?
I guess it kind of does. Yeah. And he said that it's interesting. He used, we've talked about this a couple of times in podcasts recently, but he used the term Daehanmin국, the official name of the Republic of Korea.
Oh, yeah, that's funny.
That was funny.
Times. Come on, give me what you got, Jeongmin.
So, in the office, when we were expecting the parade, we already had the Rodong Shinmun and the KCNA speech of the defense minister, and we saw there was Daehanmin국 with the quotation mark, and we said,
and explain the quotes before when Kim Jong was using the quotes. A lot of people misinterpreted this, and they're like, but then basically, I think the conclusion was using it in quotes is basically an insult, like the so-called.
Right.
It's a podcast, so you can't see our fingers, but we are doing the finger air quotes, like sarcastic sort of. So we were waiting for the defense minister to say it, so we see his gesture or the tone.
Did he do air quotes?
No, he only did it like straight, just Daehanmin국.
He read it with a straight tone, didn't he? Yeah, I remember picking that up at the time. But yeah, certainly since at least the 1980s, they've been using Daehanmin국 or Daejeongnyeong on their leaflets, the propaganda leaflets from North Korea, in quotation marks to show that it's a kind of to cast doubt on the legitimacy of it. And so he used Daehanmin국 Jolge들, which is the henchmen or running dogs of North Korea, and Daehanmin국 Yeokjeok들, which is the traitors of the so-called Republic of Korea, not people. Right. And so I think he used it 3 times in his speech there.
And he didn't use any air quotes? Or
I was very disappointed.
He didn't say it in a weird voice and then elbow the guy next to him and then the whole crowd erupts in laughter?
And just...
That didn't happen.
Yeah, that didn't happen.
By the way, to our listeners, he who we're referring to here is the North Korean defense minister and 5-star general, Kang Sung-nam. I counted 5.
4.
On his thing there. I'm going to go with 5.
Okay.
You can stick with 4. So he gave a speech that lasted for about 20 minutes. It was almost a sermon, except it didn't have as much emotion. But he went on for quite a while. He was the one giving the speech instead of Kim Jong-un.
Right. No Kim speech at the last one in February, I think.
But Kim shed tears and...
He did shed tears.
But he's been a bit aloof lately. He didn't speak at the Politburo, or at the plenum a couple of months ago, or maybe last month in June. Kind of putting on a weird kind of character these days. Another thing about the Kang Sung-nam speech is, which I think is kind of significant, is that recently there's been Kang Sung-nam, the defense minister, released a statement earlier this month talking about how the U.S. nuclear missile submarine visit could, quote unquote, meet the conditions for North Korea feeling threatened enough that they believe that the U.S. is about to launch a nuclear strike on North Korea, and then they could, according to their nuclear doctrine released last September, they could then launch a preemptive strike against the U.S. So he's saying, next time you bring your nukes to the Korean Peninsula, we might actually interpret that as a prelude to war, and we'll launch a preemptive nuclear strike on the U.S. or South Korea. That was a very stern warning. And then there were other warnings from Kim Yo-jong about, we will shoot down your reconnaissance planes. None of these were in domestic state media, okay? These were all just released for international media as far as we can tell. They weren't in the Rodong Shinmun, they weren't on KCTV. They might have been in internal teachings.
Sure.
Who knows? But The fact that Kang Soo-nam touched on all these points in his speech to the domestic audience,
right?
That's very significant.
Yeah, it sends a signal to the domestic audience that things are very serious, which maybe they haven't been hearing about recently.
Right. I thought if I were a North Korean audience standing there listening to it, they might have been caught off guard a little bit because it's like a very big jump to the previously released statements to the domestic audience. But
they're sure used to these kinds of hyperbole, I'm sure. But
right. But the direct reference to the follow-up to their nuclear doctrine in September in reference to U.S. assets, particularly, I think that's very significant.
Yeah.
So it could be a signal of more serious escalation of the rhetorical game.
And Multi-Freedom Shield U.S.-South Korea military drill is coming up in August.
Right. So any time after...
all to come.
Yeah, there's a lot of things happening there. So back to the parade itself. So is it finally about an hour and 30 minutes into the video that I got off of the Yonhap's YouTube, the actual parade started, and I think North Korea's newsreader Ri Chun-hee said, "At last the parade has begun," or something along those lines. And the first 8 minutes and the first bunch of formations that walked through were these, what I would call symbolic formations. That's how I've translated it, at least. The Sangjing Jongdae. How would you translate that, Jeongmin?
Sangjing Jongdae, symbolic, I would say.
Okay, so yeah, symbolic formations of historical units. So there were the people holding up photographs of men who are long since dead, and these were units from the Korean War from 1950. So you had everything from the symbolic column of the presidential bodyguard all the way down to a symbolic column of Seoul's Korean wartime liberation with tanks and motorbikes with sidecars.
That was to mark the anniversary of the end of the armistice.
Right, yep, the 27th of July, 70 years ago. Now, there's a couple of notes I've got in here. I was impressed that for the 1st Army Corps, the music, which had been quite martial most of the time, it broke into something almost jazzy or ragtime, some piano music.
That song, actually.
I like that too, whatever it was. And then we had, and that came in again about 1:31, just before Lee Hong-jong looked a bit tired and was hoping it would end. What else?
Real quick on that Seoul, the historical units. Is it? We're so used to it. I'm so numb to it that they talk about this all the time on state media. But they're out there at a giant celebration in Pyongyang talking about very hugely celebrating the so-called liberation of Seoul.
Yep.
Did anybody in the South Korean government react specifically to this?
Not the government, but I got some experts who said that that's actually very important because these particular units that used to be deployed for actually invading like Seoul, them being paraded with the old tanks and old weaponries. Some experts interpreted this as not having given up on the idea of unification by force, or at least celebrating it, but not out loud.
I don't know.
But not the government.
Yeah, I don't know if you can really take it that far, but at least it's symbolically, it could be interpreted as a bit provocative.
It is, yeah.
Yeah. I was also interested to see that at 1 minute 39 seconds, we had the 105th Guard Seoul Ryugyong-su Armored Division, which some people may not have paid much attention to, but I immediately did. My ears pricked up because according to the North Korean government, Kim Jong-il's inspiration for Songun, the military first politics, came from a visit that he paid with his father Kim Il-sung to the Seoul 105th Guards Armored Division headquarters in Pyongyang on the 25th of August 1960. The 25th of August is still a national holiday, the day of Songun, so that's probably a little hat tip to Songun, I guess, by having them there.
And that's still around. I think that unit has moved a bit, and then they've turned that old unit location into a revolutionary site. But that they still have a unit that's called this whole Ryugyong-su.
Ryugyong-su, right. Now, something I hadn't seen before, maybe I wasn't watching carefully, but I looked at the running sheet for the February parade. I couldn't see them there. At 1 hour and 46 minutes, we had the State Security Ministry, the Gukga Boisong, all wearing black suits and ties and black sunglasses. Is this the first time appearance of a plainclothes security force, in plain clothes, not in a military uniform?
There was a paramilitary parade when they were...
This unit wearing suits, holding guns at their sides in this very funny way, that's happened at least once, maybe a few times in these parades. We've seen that before, but I don't think that they were wearing sunglasses before. So
right.
Cue the music. Yeah.
Right, I wear my sunglasses at night. That's the song they've got to play for that. Yeah, but interesting. Okay, so they weren't there in February, but they have been there before. And then after the State Security Ministry, we had the Sahae Anjan Song, which is the Ministry of Social Security, which is basically the police of North Korea. I didn't see any weapons there. I just saw basically police in short-sleeved shirts. Is that basically what you saw?
They looked like traffic police, but I haven't dug into that as far as what their specific role was.
Now, after them, here comes a unit that I've never heard of before, the Sahwe Anjon Gun, and I looked that up, and that is apparently a
German Shepherds,
a paramilitary organization. Yes, so there were men with riot shields and German Shepherds. It looked very much like riot police. It looked like the Gyeokdu Gyeongchal of South Korea, and according to what I've read in a not on NK News but elsewhere, that they correspond to the Soviet Army and the internal force and border guards of Eastern Bloc countries. So they're in charge of patrolling the North Korea-China border. But again, the image of effectively what looked like riot police in a country that has no riots or social disturbances, that was a little bit strange, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Have you ever heard of or seen this unit, the Sahwe Anjon Gun, before?
Yeah, these riot police-looking units have appeared in at least a few parades now.
Okay.
Going back to 2020 maybe, or maybe 2021.
I remember that because I tried to ID the dogs.
Oh yeah, there was a strange kind of rumor or something going around where it was like, do all the dogs look the same? Are they clones?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, but they've showed up in a parade before.
Okay, but not in February. Yeah, I couldn't find any running sheets of earlier ones, so
and
not in time for this.
No confirmed cases of these riot police being used on the streets.
Right.
Be very interesting to imagine because that's what they look like. They're used for, but never heard of a case of them in action.
Because you don't need a lot of clear perspex shields at the border to stop the potential hordes of Chinese who may come over into Yalu, the Yalu River and settle in North Pyongan province.
Maybe they used them last year during the COVID outbreak because during one of the meetings, an official came up on stage during one of North Korea's meetings and said that people were breaking out of their quarantine zones and rushing to pharmacies. So maybe they used them then.
Okay, yeah. So again, it's a paramilitary group, the Sahwe Anjon Gun, normally under the control of the police, the Sahwe Anjon Song, but in emergency, they fall under the Ministry of Social Security. Beg your pardon, under the emergency, they fall under the military. So they're kind of, they've got a foot in both camps. Police and military.
Okay.
All right. What else stuck out to you on the parade, Jeongmin?
Well, we haven't gotten to the 기계화종대, the weapons yet, but among the ones that marched, I thought, for me, I want to follow up on this, but there was 제41 상륙 돌격 대대종대, which is assault, amphibious assault. Unit, and in the narration, Ri Chun-hee said this unit is for, at emergency, to annihilate or hunt down the pirates in Western Sea of the peninsula, including Baekneung Island.
Oh, hello.
But I couldn't fully...
It's a South Korean island.
Yeah, I couldn't fully hear the entire narration, so it's like little bits of the sentence, but mentioning Baekneung, I don't think I've heard that before. I'll have to check again, but that was very interesting to me.
Right, that is the northernmost and the westernmost island under the control of the Republic of Korea. It's closer to the North Korean mainland than it is to the South Korean mainland. And obviously people there would be a bit nervous when they hear their own island named in a speech like that.
And saying they're pirates, I'm like, what are you referring to?
Well, because it was over the decades, luckily not recently, but over the decades, fishermen from that island and nearby islands were kidnapped and taken against their will to North Korea, right? The Napbuk Obu.
Right.
Yeah. Then right after the paramilitary group that I mentioned just before, that's when it switched from marching groups to others. So we had a Top Gun style video that was edited in there with some fun scenes of pilots playing with model planes.
Yeah, I asked Twitterverse like what these small airplanes were modeled after. People said Su-70 or something.
Okay, well, yeah, that's just the jet models of the... Yeah, but this is common in North Korea. They promote... So at Air Force bases, they have these courts, like a basketball court, but it's a court with a terrain map on it, painted with mountains, terrain, and all that. And that's how they imagine their training.
So it's like a flight simulator 3D.
Yeah. So they hold these model planes, and then they kind of imagine their formations together. And I think probably practically speaking, it's not a bad idea and a way of kind of getting in that space, imagining how you're going to do your flight formations. But visually, it definitely looks funny and old-fashioned. But
it's also because of the music and the editing.
Yeah.
I think I've been told before that other countries do that or have done that. Maybe not anymore, but yeah.
Okay. Let's talk about the drones, both the aerial and the underwater drones. We saw, Colin, couple of weeks ago, you wrote a story about this structure that was being built next to or near the Arch of Triumph in Pyongyang that you thought may have been holding drones. Is that what it turned out to be?
Well, it certainly seems that way, but I haven't seen any image proving that they've came out of there. But yeah, we saw this ahead of the parade. It was a structure built in a place it's not usually built. It made me think that maybe this is for something that hasn't appeared in a parade before, because otherwise they store all their other weapons at this purpose-built base in another part of Pyongyang. And it turned out to be right that the drones were paraded for the first time. Just one of the models with with around a 20-meter wingspan was actually the only one that was driven through the parade, because the other one has a wingspan of, I think, 35 meters maybe.
That's a long wingspan.
Too wide.
And one of them was shown at the beginning of the video.
Both of them were shown doing flyover of the parade square, some in the hours before it started. It was still raining at the time.
Yeah.
And so these two drones, they are modeled very precisely after the U.S. Global Hawk, which is a surveillance drone, a high-altitude surveillance drone.
That's the one with a longer wingspan.
Right. And a U.S. Reaper drone, which is a combat/reconnaissance drone, which is a little bit smaller.
They both look very, very familiar.
Yeah, they were both revealed actually the previous day in state media at a weapons expo. And
this is the weapons expo that Shoigu went to, right?
Right, and this was the first look at these two, except in June, we were the first to report at NK Pro about the flight testing of these two models. So we actually caught these on satellite imagery back in June at Panghyon Air Base in the northwest. And so we knew this was coming. And if our readers were paying attention to us, they would not have been surprised to see these at the parade or the expo.
And what the names were also interesting.
Give us the names.
Setbyeol 4 and Setbyeol 9.
Right.
And the number follows, apparently, the American drones numbers 4 and 9 for Global Hawk and Reaper. Setbyeol means morning star.
Morning star, or sometimes Venus.
Right, maybe. Yeah, that's true. But
that would make sense as
Venus is the morning star, right?
Hwasong, Hwasong and Venus.
Hwasong being Mars. Yeah, Mars and Venus.
So maybe we need to change our translation.
Yeah. We translated to Setbyeol and then SB, morning
probably
star.
Venus is probably...
Yeah, Venus makes sense if it's Hwasong.
Well, what does it mean that North Korea has such drones that they apparently... How could they have modeled it after the Global Hawk and the Reaper? Does that mean that they've picked up a broken one from somewhere, or they've bought it on the black market, or they've simply reverse engineered based on video footage? What does it mean?
I mean, I think
that's a remaining question.
I think it could be any of those. Have
any of them been shot down around the world that we know of and fallen into enemy hands?
I saw someone made that theory on Twitter. I forgot who it was, but they were like, North Korea definitely got the plans from Iran, who shot down one of these. I forgot which one, a Global Hawk or a Reaper, but Iran apparently shot one of those down. I don't know the details on
that. That does make sense. And I was thinking also if
I don't know why they would get that from. I mean, maybe they traded it or something.
Could have
if one had been downed over Syria, for example, it wouldn't be hard to imagine that it could have fallen into the hands of North Korean observers or advisors and then shipped back.
But then they've also hacked. They've a bunch. I don't know the details on that either, but it's not infeasible that they could have hacked their way into these plans, considering their skills in that department.
Right. Now, I think you also pointed out, Colin, in your story that they may or may not have satellite access. So that little bulbous bit above the head there that normally would hide the satellite dish.
Communication.
May not actually be functional if it doesn't have because North Korea doesn't have any.
Right. So I was told this by one expert, and then I saw others also kind of touch on this point. So it could either be that someone wrote that it could be they have to stay faithful to the design, the aerodynamics of this design. So regardless of whether or not there is a satellite under that radome at the head of the drone, that they wouldn't mess with that, because that could mess with the whole design of the how it works aerodynamically. But it implies that they would have something under there, and then maybe they could be borrowing bandwidth from other countries. That was what I was told.
Oh, it's like renting some bandwidth on a satellite of a friendly country.
Sure. I don't know how that would work, but
Jeongmin, have you got any thoughts on the underwater drones? The hail, what do they call them? Tsunami.
Underwater nuclear attack drone.
Right. It was the first time they thought they were being paraded at a military parade, but this time there was no Bukguksong on the military parade. The submarine launched ballistic missiles, I guess hail
There was
took
at
the
the
stage.
expo, though.
There was it at the expo.
And I think I did see a submarine-launched cruise missile.
Not
submarine launched.
Oh,
but there were cruise missiles.
Strategic cruise missile.
Okay, fair enough. Yep. So what's the word on these hail?
Just the same as they have been referring to in the past, that they will use a tsunami to kill all the enemy ships, basically, and the core of their nuclear forces in North Korea. It was very similar to past state media references.
So this is a weapon that North Korea revealed earlier this year.
Right.
They said earlier this year they only released a couple of still photos, and they said that Kim Jong-un has been guiding, I think, dozens of these tests since, I forgot now, but at least a few years ago. So they said that this was something being developed for years now that was not reported publicly in state media until earlier this year in the spring. And they talked about at least 2 different models and 3 different tests. And so there were not very many images released at the time. And so now comparing this one, it has a different paint job than any of those that we saw before. We don't know which exact model of that this is. And then there's a lot of speculation out there from the experts on whether or not this is a real system, how effective it could be. They compare it to, I think it's a Russian weapon called Poseidon, and how that is a nuclear-powered, nuclear-armed torpedo of similar kind of length or similar size.
Yeah.
And the speculation is that North Korea's would not be nuclear-powered. It would be battery-powered, so that affects the range. And also there is attention being placed on how you would actually deploy or launch this. Would it be, if it's from the port, that's very vulnerable.
Yeah.
And
because you can preemptively shoot a port before these things get launched.
Sure. And there's not evidence yet that this thing can be equipped onto a submarine for launch from a submarine. So there's a whole lot of questions still remaining on this system, but it's just another thing that the adversaries have to think about and consider and try to address. So that's North Korea's game plan in the last few years, is just all angles, weapons from trains, from nukes from all angles. Yeah.
Okay, well, final thoughts on the parade, Jeongmin. Perhaps do you have any thoughts on how it ended with Kim Jong-un flanked by Shoigu and followed a little bit by Lee Hong-jung walking back and forth along the reviewing stand to wave at the adoring crowds? Then it cut to Ri Chun-hee in her hanbok in the studio.
Well, I would just say that I think Kim Jong-un knew that Shoigu was going to steal the thunder in international media, and he made full use of it. And Shoigu, if you look at Rodong Sinmun, he was on the front page of Rodong Sinmun 2 days in a row. First one on the meeting and the expo, on the meeting, one-on-one meeting, and then 3 of them Russian delegation, Chinese delegation, and Kim Jong-un on the viewing stand. So it definitely was like they are the spotlight.
Yeah.
But I was keeping a close eye on whenever Kim Jong-un was whispering to Shoigu or, having a one-on-one chat while Lee was standing awkwardly next to them. They were definitely gesturing to each other, pointing at certain weapons, and I think it's important to review them again.
Any thoughts that maybe Shoigu was on a shopping trip?
I think there was definitely that vibe. I couldn't hear what they were saying, right? But there were moments where Kim Jong-un was like, Shoigu was like 5, and then Kim Jong-un says, 5. And then someone translates. And there were other parts where Shoigu was asking a question and Kim Jong-un was explaining using the hand gesture, and then the translator would explain again. I'm very interested to know what they were referring to. But
of course, there were moments where he did lean over to Lee Hong-jung and made some comments to him too, right? I mean, it wasn't like he was only talking
there
to
were
Shoigu.
Those moments, but it seemed like the contexts were different. To Lee, they were like laughing and very friendly, but to Shoigu, it was more like very businessy. They were Kim Jong-un
military
was
nerds,
Yeah, military. They were explaining things too.
Right.
Like
doesn't necessarily mean
that he was shopping,
right.
But Kim Jong-un was very passionately explaining things.
Okay. Colin, final thoughts from you?
Oh, gosh. I mean, there's a lot to review. I think that we will move on from this quite quickly because of what's going to be happening in August with the joint drills on the U.S. South Korea side. This could just be the beginning. Like I said earlier, this is an introduction of many very provocative statements from the defense minister to the domestic audience. It says to me that they're preparing them for more of this confrontational situations to come.
And in a little over 2 months, we're going to have a military parade here in Seoul, right?
I was just going to say, it's September 26th near Gwanghwamun.
Okay. So, a little bit less than 2 months. Will this parade affect that parade?
Well, I was just saying to our Monday meeting, I was saying South Korean government is very allergic to people referring to it as military parade. They want it to be referred to as street march because of the bad connotations military parade has on the peninsula.
Well, too bad.
But we are going to call it military parade. It's a military parade.
This thing we saw in Pyongyang, they called it a yeolbyongshik. Is that right? What are they calling the street parade in South Korea?
시가행진.
Okay, so literally a street parade. Interesting.
Well, like the street parade is the Gwanghwamun part, but they will start at the Seoul airport, the military one.
Down there in Songnam.
So that part could be like yeolbyongshik. It could be a military parade,
right?
Military review. But the Gwanghwamun part they will be adamantly calling it a street march.
Okay, well, I'm sorry I won't be in the country for that one, but I'll certainly be watching on the YouTube later on. Thank you very much, Colin Zwirko and Jeongmin Kim, for joining me here to talk about the parade. Send in somebody else to come and talk to me about 300 episodes of the podcast.
Thank you, Jacco.
Thank you, Jacco.
Thank you. All right, and I am now joined around the table by a new batch of colleagues. We have James Fretwell. Say hello.
Hello, thank you for having me on again.
That was far too long. And and we have Anton Sokolin,
yeah, that's correct.
I'll get it right the next time. And we have my new colleague, first time on the podcast, Alana Hill. Welcome on the show.
Thank you for having me.
So this is our 300th episode, as I mentioned in the first bit of recording. It's really nice of North Korea to throw a parade for us on an occasion like this. I didn't need it. A telegram, a simple cake would have been enough, but they decided to go all out and throw a parade. Alana, tell me how you came to join us here at NK News.
So I've been in Korea for the past 6 years working in journalism, doing a mix of everything really. When I first started out, I was working in radio at KBS and mainly doing national news. Then I moved to a newspaper where I was doing national again, and then I did culture for a long time. And I decided I was ready for a bit of a change. So I very luckily got the job here. And it's been a big change for me going from, BTS to North Korea. But I've really enjoyed it so far. It's been a really hectic first month, but very exciting.
Excellent. And not to put you on the spot or anything, but have you heard an episode of the podcast before?
Of course, yeah. I've been the one listening to them before I upload them. So, yes.
Okay. But you haven't heard all 300, I'm guessing.
No, not yet.
Very few people can claim that feat. Even I haven't heard all 300, and I was on most of them. James, what have you been working on these days?
What have I been working on these days? Well, of course, the parade stuff that's been taking up lots of time, day and night, thinking about North Korea's military parade, how to cover it, new angles.
Well, here's one for you. Here's something I did not discuss with Colin and Jeongmin when they were in here. It seemed to me as if Kim Jong-un has developed a new black spot on his left cheek.
I noticed that.
Did you notice?
Yes,
it was quite
did.
significant.
Yeah.
It may even be a 3D one.
Yes.
And I'd never seen that before. James, did you pick up on that?
I did not pick up on that. That seems like a job our superstar Colin Zwirko, who monitors state media, looking out for these little developments.
It does remind me that way back, more than 10 years ago, there was a similar story when Kim Jong-il developed a new spot on his face there. So this is one of the things that when you're reporting on a country that's so hard to get information out of, you're really reduced to the visuals in many cases, right?
We'll get on it, Jacco. Expect a 5,000-word in-depth analysis on this new spot.
Thank you very much there. Anton, last night I was watching some video footage of I think it was a post-parade performance of North Koreans singing songs in Russian. Have you seen that clip yet?
Yes, I have. I haven't actually listened to the songs that they were singing, but I did notice that. It's pretty interesting. But it just,
if the pronunciation was good.
I'm sorry, I cannot say anything about that. But it does highlight the importance of the Russian delegation in North Korea, I think.
Yeah, talk a little bit more about that.
Well, the Russian defense minister Sergei Shoigu visited North Korea, attended the parade, and participated in a bunch of banquets, drinking some wine.
When was the last time we had somebody at like a delegation this high level from Russia?
Definitely, it's been years, and definitely way before the pandemic. And we can really say that Shoigu's presence there was one of the really highest level visits by like Russian delegates. So since, I don't know, maybe 2019, 18.
I think I seem to remember that Shoigu actually thanked Kim Jong-un, or maybe gave a letter from Putin thanking Kim Jong-un for his support on the special military operation.
Right, that's correct. Shoigu delivered Putin's message to Kim Jong-un. We don't know actually the real contents of that message, because there was, I think there was two messages. One was a private one, and the other one was a public one that was disclosed at this big party event where Shoigu actually read it out loud. And then in that message, he relayed Putin's words saying, thank you, Kim Jong-un and North Korea, for supporting the special military operation.
Right. We've talked a little bit about this before, I think, especially James, on some of the earlier roundtables about what actually has North Korea done for the special military operation. We've heard reports, and we've heard the U.S. State Department saying that North Korea has sent weapons. We haven't really seen them in use, except last week suddenly there was this story about Ukrainians possibly using confiscated North Korean weapons.
Yeah, that seems to be, I think a blogger had touched on this issue before the Financial Times reported on it. But yeah, it's all a bit, the only thing we've heard of about Russia using North Korean weapons is the US asserting that they have, intelligence suggesting that this is happening, and they released some satellite photos of some cargo crossing the border. But we've also been thinking, with all the open source analysis that's going on Twitter and other websites of the Ukraine war, there have been no North Korean weapons that have showed up thus far. So we're not doubting that North Korea is sending weapons. We're not accepting it as 100% fact until we get that kind of confirmation.
Yeah.
But this visit from the high-level Russian delegation is definitely going to raise alarms in the US about what is going on there.
One of the questions that I've heard, which is at this stage unanswered, but yes, it seems that Russia might be wanting to get some weaponry from North Korea, but can North Korea produce in the volume and at the speed that Russia is going through these things, right? I mean, if you're talking about the numbers of bullets and shells and drones and things that are being used up on both the Russian and the Ukrainian side each week, each month, it seems like an open question as to whether North Korea could ever produce at that right speed.
Well, I assume that North Korea has stockpiled tons of shells and bullets and whatever over the years since basically the end of the Korean War. So there's no problem with supplying it.
Does any of that, like with packet of milk in the fridge, after a month you can't drink it anymore? Do weapons ever degrade over time if you don't use them?
They do. That's why it's dangerous to use them. And that's what actually was highlighted in the Financial Times article, that Ukrainian commanders are very cautious about using those weaponry, because you never know. They're like loose cannon, literally.
Gosh, God. Okay. Now, Lena, tell us about what your role is here at NK News. What do you do? You're the new Arias Dare, which means I'm now thanking you at the end of each podcast episode rather than him. But what do you do?
So I'm the deputy managing editor. So I'm under our fearless leader, Mr. Brian Betts. He's managing editor. And basically I'm just editing stories. I listen to the podcast. I write the brief for the podcast. I mainly do the Ask a North Korean pieces, which I really have been enjoying so far. And a bit of everything so far.
Okay, and do you intend to be writing some stories at some point?
I hope so, yeah. I feel like that's a bit far off now, but yeah, definitely.
Do you have
in the future.
A niche that you're looking to corner?
Not yet, yeah. Maybe the Russia. No, I'm just kidding, Anton.
Yes, that's right. We can't be cannibalizing from our... No. All right. Okay. Well, thank you all three. Thank you, all of you, very much for coming on the show. Cycle in the next lot.
Will do.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jacco.
Come back for episode 400.
Definitely we will.
Excellent. Good to hear your enthusiasm there. All right, and I am now joined around the table by three more of my colleagues, and I will let you introduce yourselves.
John Lee, editor of Korea Pro.
Yeji Chang, a news trainee at NK News/Korea Pro.
And my name is Lena Park, and I'm also a news trainee, and I just celebrated my 1 month here.
Hey, you're 1 month. Fantastic. So we all have a milestone here. Episode 300 of the podcast, 1 month that you of you being here. And when did you start, Yeji?
I started around this time last year, like around September, I believe.
Ah, okay.
August, I don't know.
And you are shortly to leave us.
Yes.
What will you be doing after that?
I'll be going back to the States to finish my bachelor's at college.
Aha, okay.
Yeah.
So, but your time here, you've certainly learned a lot over the last year?
I sure did. I worked with such a great team and talented people that I am very grateful that I had this opportunity.
Excellent. Will you be after you finish your bachelor? What are you planning to do?
No plans. No solid plans right now, but I'm hoping to stay in this field of journalism. Yeah, and being able to, hopefully I'll be able to utilize whatever I've learned from NK News.
And what's the most fun or interesting or memorable story that you've worked on in the time that you've been here?
Yeah, it surely would be that one time that I interviewed Haner, who's a North Korean soldier who defected across DMZ.
Yeah.
He had such
Was he the multiple crosser? Like he went back to get his mother? Or am I getting my stories mixed up?
I don't think that was him.
Okay.
He escaped through his DMZ once, and he's aspiring to be an actor in Korea. Yeah. And he had such an amazing story. Yifang and I met him, and did an interview. And I think that was very interesting.
That is a memorable story, yeah. And John, you're working more on Korea Pro these days than NK News and NK Pro. So what's in your radar these days?
Well, today I am editing a piece about how the defense industry has managed to export 129 Redback infantry fighting vehicles to Australia.
Redback, like the Spider?
It was named after the Spider, actually.
Okay. What is a Redback fighting vehicle? What does that do?
It is a light armored infantry fighting vehicle. It's supposed to be crewed by 3 people, but it's a vehicle that's able to transport up to 8 infantry units at once. It's got 30mm cannons and other anti-missile guided rockets as well. It's got armor around it, and it's supposed to be a bit faster than tanks. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, they can travel up to 40 kilometers per hour, or is it 40 miles? Maybe 40 kilometers. But it's a brand new military vehicle, which was designed specifically to be exported. So what that means is that the Korean army doesn't even have this vehicle in their arsenal.
Wow. And how many of these were exported to Australia?
It was originally supposed to be 450, but after the Australian government slashed back on their army acquisition procurement programs, that number has been slashed to 129.
Okay, and who's the manufacturer of this?
Hana Defense. It's the same company that makes the K9 self-propelled howitzer.
Ah, okay. So that's Hana, not Hanwha.
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 Yes.
Okay. Wow. All right. Yeah, they're certainly a big one in the defense industry. I think they also used to produce tear gas, if I'm not mistaken.
That was one of the exports. I believe they exported it to Turkey, but after some international backlash, I think they might have stopped exporting that. But I'm not quite sure about that.
Okay. And Lena, you've been here in the podcast studio before, but not behind a mic. You've been filming.
Yeah, that's correct.
So what is it that, what's the project that you're doing with filming highlights?
Yeah, so I think that a lot of great topics come out on podcasts, but unfortunately they are very long, and I would really like more people to listen to them. So I'm making them into shorter clips to reach more people, and that's what I'm doing.
And so they go up on the social media, on the NK News Twitter channel.
Yeah, I'm the new face behind social media.
You're the new face behind social media. Yeah, are we on TikTok yet?
No, not yet.
Is that part of the plan?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Okay, good. And what else are you working on while you're here?
Well, I started writing my first piece for Korea Pro, but I'm hoping to write more articles for NK News as well. Yeah.
Okay. What interests you about Korea or North Korea?
Well, about Korea, I am currently writing a piece on tipping culture, and I'm definitely interested in more socioeconomic factors that are affecting the society today.
Is there a tipping culture in Korea?
Yeah, so that is very interesting. So there isn't, but there has been a recent backlash against Kakao.
Yes, I just noticed last week a Kakao taxi is now forcing me to decide whether or not to tip my driver.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, so that's what I'm writing about. So please look forward to that.
It's a fascinating decision. Do you know who made that or how this decision came about within Kakao? That would be interesting to know.
Yeah, because Cacao said that the taxi drivers have been experiencing difficulty with their wages. And so Cacao has been implementing this new policy for taxi drivers to get more income, but there's a debate on whether tipping is necessary and whether it will improve their conditions. Yeah.
Right. I mean, surely if a taxi driver's salary is not enough to live on, then shouldn't they just raise the basic fee of the taxis rather than encourage people to tip?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, an open question. I leave that with you all. Yes, okay. Lena, Yeji, John, thanks very much for coming on the podcast, and we will see you send to the next group.
Thank you.
Okay, and we have now our last crew that have cycled into the NK News studio. Cycled, that's a good pun for you, Niels. Yes, well, let's
I
go.
did cycle this morning, in fact, yeah.
Exactly. So we have everyone go around the table and say your name and your title here.
Okay. Yeah, my name is Niels. I'm the Director of News Operations at Korea Risk Group and working a lot on NK News, NK Pro, Korea Pro, all over the place.
You are all over the place, like me, on a morning without coffee. Brian
Betts. I'm the Managing Editor at NK News and NK Pro.
And Brian, what's the word? He has oversight over all the podcasts, so he has to approve every topic that I do. So he's my boss.
Yes.
Okay, Peter.
Peter Ward, a contributing analyst at NK Pro, also do work on Korea Pro, mainly related to the economy.
Yeah, you are quite the boffer when it comes to the economy. What do you think about the economics of doing 300 podcasts over 5.5 years? Thoughts?
Well, I think from your point of view, it seems to be working out reasonably well. From the company's point of view, I would defer to Niels, of course. But after 300 podcasts, one would imagine it's generating enough value for yourself and for the company to have made it sustainable up until this point. And many happy returns. I hope it continues to do so.
Thank you. Were you trained as a diplomat? That was a fantastic answer.
Spent a lot of time around diplomats. May have picked up a few of their habits.
Excellent. All right. Now, you've heard all 300 episodes of the podcast, haven't you, Peter?
Unfortunately, not yet. Hopefully soon.
I think you're ahead of Niels, who confessed to me once that he doesn't listen to the podcast as a general rule.
Yeah, the connection between my ears and my brain is not working very well. With the eyes, reading is much better, much more effective.
It is true. Some people are more...
I do like your voice, though.
Thank you. Yeah, some people are more visual learners and some are more oral learners. This is why I had to give up learning Japanese 30 years ago, because I couldn't remember the how to write the kanji. So I'm not a good visual learner, and I've effectively stopped reading. But that's...
See, with Chinese and me, that worked pretty well. Looking and yeah.
See, I much prefer listening to reading, but I can't say I retain information better as a result.
So it's more pleasurable, but less is retained.
I think so. Yeah, but I much prefer listening. Yeah.
Brian, any favorite topic that you've heard since you've become managing editor here?
Favorite topic on the podcast? Well, shortly after I joined a couple years ago, you did the big, almost 3-hour interview with Stephen Began.
Yes.
And I was given the task of listening to the whole thing and writing a story on it. So spent a lot of time with that one, transcribing and then writing the story. And it was a great interview.
That was for me a favorite one too. It was one I'd been looking forward to for a long time, and did spend a lot of time going through all of his previous statements and media interviews and prep for it. So yeah, it was. It's one I think that'll stand the test of time. If only we can get perhaps Mike Pompeo or Donald Trump in. I did write to Donald Trump's team in Florida most recently, and somebody was kind enough to write back to me after the, third or fourth email that said he will not be able, your request will not be, fulfilled at this time. So.
Jackie, you should have tweeted at him, or, X'd at him.
He's not on Twitter anymore. Well, he is back
No, that's
on
right. Truth, you should have Truth Social at him.
Oh, I don't want to join another platform.
Truth
What about John Bolton?
Yeah, well, no, he was a good interview. I enjoyed having him on. He was on, just about a month ago. I kept the video of that one because he was wearing a seersucker suit. And, I'm always a sucker for a good seersucker suit.
And Marcus Galakis?
Mr. G, yeah, also from the intelligence community. That was great fun too. Yeah, wow, so you have been listening. And,
a little bit.
And you've retained some of it.
Yeah, a bit, yeah. Just a bit. I'd like to retain more, though, yeah.
And what are you focusing on these days with regards to North Korea's economy? What's got your attention?
Well, today we are just talking to one of the correspondents here about North Korean GDP estimates from the Bank of Korea. Some interesting data
Have
points.
Have they just been released recently?
Yeah, just released today, I think, in the last couple of days, yeah.
Okay. Is this an annual thing that the Bank of Korea does, right?
So the Bank of Korea has been estimating the size of the North Korean economy officially on the record, I think, since at least the 1990s. I imagine they were doing it long before then as well.
So they use what called shadow statistics or things like that?
So mirror statistics from every customs authority that isn't North Korea on North Korea's trade account. satellite imagery, and they also have their own government sources, which they're very vague about, but I would imagine it includes intelligence estimates of various kinds.
Okay, and so what is the size of the North Korean economy right now, according to the Bank of Korea?
Well, a little under $30 billion total.
That's less than Elon Musk bought Twitter for, isn't it?
Sure, and it's not. You couldn't sell the economy off as assets on the global market either. So it's in cash terms, it's going to be worth a lot less than that as well, right? So
hang on. So 30 billion is, in theory, it's the
price of
the next best estimate of all of North Korea's economic output over over a year.
And a fair amount of that is not monetizable or commoditized. Yeah,
except the part that came in cryptocurrency.
Right. I'm not sure. I imagine they probably do include crypto, but you don't see much. You don't see a massive crypto effect in their estimates. So maybe they don't actually.
Just to compare, what's South Korea's GDP at the moment?
1.6 trillion, I think, or something like that. Yeah, it's
a big
much
multiple.
larger.
Yeah. Okay. So where does that rank in terms of nations of the world? What else is sort of comparable?
I don't currently know. I guess I'd say Ghana or something like that. I'm not sure. Sorry to all Ghanaian listeners.
I think Ghana might be a bit better than
that.
Let me have it.
Get my phone out. But yeah, that means that North Korean GDP per capita is around $1,200. Well, what's really interesting about these numbers, though, is that when you look at the actual estimates, they're not that different to North Korea's own estimates, the ones that they publish in their sort of rather selective, sporadic releases in UN reports, the UNICEF report or a social development, a sustainable development goals report. Oh no, I'm very sorry to the people of Ghana. No. Ghana's GDP is double, in nominal terms, double North Korea's. But what's really interesting is that the gross number and then the per capita number are very similar to North Korea's own estimates they release through the UN system from time to time. And if anything, the CIA, US Central Intelligence Agency, is far more optimistic about North Korea's GDP.
What are they estimated at?
$35 billion, I think, was the last estimate I saw.
Okay.
So North Koreans themselves are, the difference is the line of the line of travel. The North Koreans think that their economy is growing, whereas the South Koreans have been saying that the North Korean economy is shrinking slightly for some years, but the actual size, not that different.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. Brian, what's on top of mind this week as managing editor here of NK News and NK Pro?
Well, we're coming off of the high of the military parade last week, so there's a lot to dig into still. We've had a lot of the top line coverage with the Russian and Chinese delegations and showing off the new drones. Now it's kind of time to dig into the coverage a little bit more, look at questions like, these drones very closely resemble U.S. models.
Yes. There was a lot of speculation about why, how.
How, did they steal their hackers steal these designs?
Right.
I mean, lots of questions like that to follow up on.
Yeah, anything's possible, isn't it? They could have taken bits of a downed drone and tried to reverse engineer it.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and then the other thing is it kind of got overshadowed last week with the military parade, but Travis King is still in DPRK custody.
Tomorrow will be 2 weeks exactly. And North Korea still hasn't said anything in their media yet, have they?
They have not said anything. According to the UN command, they have at least had contact with the North Korean side, but that appears to be it so far. We had some analysis after he crossed over saying either this is probably going to get finished really quickly or this is going to be some long drawn-out thing. Well, it's been 2 weeks now, so
I know, maybe it's not a good sign, is it? The last time this happened, when Joseph White crossed in 1982, if I'm not mistaken, North Korea put out a statement almost on the same day, like really, really quickly to say, we've got this guy, and they were publishing leaflets in Korean and English within a matter of months to scatter over South Korea. So it is unlike them to be this quiet on an issue. They clearly know that people, the world is interested to hear about. Yeah. Now, Niels, a topic that we haven't discussed lately is just, you hinted at this before with North Korea's cryptocurrency activity. Just cybersecurity. Is there an increase in North Korea trying to phish or scam or people online through emails and other like LinkedIn messages lately?
Yeah, I mean, there's always an increase. I mean, it's definitely not going away. I mean, speaking of hackers, actually, we were kind of disappointed that there was no North Korean cyber squad marching in the military parade. I've always been wondering when we'll see that there will be a squad with like laptops or at least kind of like keyboard clutched under their arms to signify that. It's pretty interesting that the North Koreans don't really use cybersecurity to project power, even though they clearly at this point have a reputation and a pretty bad one too. I mean, a good one and a bad one in a good way, or the other way around.
Right,
but they don't put this on display, and neither do many other countries, to be fair.
Right, yeah, because what we did see, and here's a photograph of it here, They did show, I know it's been on before, but it was my first time to watch it, the Social Security Forces, which are a paramilitary organization, normally under the control of the police, but under the military when there's a time of emergency. And this is the next closest thing that North Korea has to riot police, with perspex-looking curved shields and German shepherds. Why does a country like that need such a riot force? Apparently to hold back people from the border who might want to cross over into North Korea seeking a better life there.
It's for the rioting foreigners.
Right, yeah. But have you noticed any interesting trends in cyber attacks from North Korea lately?
Well, I mean, one is certainly that that all the phishing materials are getting much more perfect and much harder to spot, because they probably, just like everybody, use ChatGPT and other LLMs to generate that content. It's definitely been a market shift ever since ChatGPT kind of popped into everybody's conscience, that the emails are flawless. It's flawless English. You really can't spot it anymore.
Yes, and we won't know for a while how successful they are with these better, more flawless attempts, but I can imagine that a few more people will fall victim to it, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
And what does that usually mean? What happens to you if you fall victim to a North Korean scam or phishing attack?
Well, I guess the most disappointing part is that initially you won't know. You'll know when your cryptocurrency is gone, if you have any. Mm-hmm. You maybe won't know until a year later when somebody finds out that your machine has been compromised. Your email address may be used to send phishing emails to others who trust you to not phish them. In the worst case, you have a keylogger installed on your computer that logs all your keystrikes and may empty your bank account. Who knows? But I think the biggest risk really is for those who have cryptocurrency, and for those of us who are very well connected, like journalists like you, who just are the kind of person who emails people and get read simply because people trust you.
What should people do to stay safe?
Turn off their computer. Never turn it on again.
Okay, you've heard it here first, folks. Go back to paper and pen. But failing that, assuming you can't do that for work or other reasons, have some good security software installed?
Yeah, I mean, certainly the most basic thing is just keep systems up to date. Like keep your Windows, keep your Mac OS or your Linux up to date on the latest version. Don't use pirated software. There's no such thing as a free Microsoft Office license. So basically buy your stuff, run your updates, don't wait. If you can get around using browsers like Internet Explorer, you're probably on the better side with some of the more secure browsers. I shouldn't say that. Edge has gotten pretty good, but most importantly, keep your software up to date. And then if you can't afford it at all, just run some antivirus software on top of that. Even though with the very, very cutting, I mean, the North Koreans have gotten so good at malware, and they vary it so often that it's quite difficult for a lot of antivirus software to keep detecting it. Mm-hmm. So it's good to invest into quality software that can deal with malware that has not been seen in the wild, that isn't as documented yet, maybe with a heuristic detection.
One thing I wonder whether, I know in Russia and in Eastern Europe, there's a lot of these, what you call ransomware hacks, right? Where they freeze your computer, they encrypt all the files, and then you've got to pay some cryptocurrency to decrypt it. Does North Korea engage in that? That's a good question. We don't see that very often yet. I'm not quite sure why. I think probably because stealing cryptocurrency is so much more efficient and effective. I mean, they can still steal tens of millions of dollars in a single swoop. Like, why would they extort people for $100 at a time? I think it's just not necessary yet. But that will very likely change. I think we'll see that more often once security improves on the cryptocurrency exchanges. They will start hacking individuals a lot more, I think.
Okay. Or was it the cryptocurrency exchange last week that was bragging, the North Korean hackers only stole 300 million from us or something
That's right.
Like that?
I think it was 30 million. Yeah.
30 million.
So that's where we're at now. That when they only take 30 million, you kind of lucked out, and that's a good thing.
That is not the kind of public messaging you want to send out. Those people need to get a good public relations firm. Final thoughts. What would you like to see on the podcast in the future, in the next 100 episodes? Peter, anything?
I really loved the World Festival of Youth and Students story arc.
Right.
Long, sort of series, with maybe historical, maybe more contemporary. A lot of fun to listen to. So that's sort of like following a story arc, as it were.
A story arc, okay. And then, of course, having you come in and tell about the economics of that story arc.
Yeah, well, potentially. Of course, I'm always open.
Brian?
Donald Trump?
Yes, we got to keep trying. I think with he's kind of busy. He's tied up with legal things these days, and I think that may be why.
That might imperil his presidential chances. So
he may have more free time in his hands.
You can catch him on the rebound.
On the rebound, right? Niels?
Well, naturally, more cybersecurity coverage. To be honest, I think there's quite a bit of interest in it, and it's a complex topic. I think it would be good to have more episodes that kind of dive into it and make it accessible for people who don't kind of stare at their screen and hack away every day. Just make it accessible.
That's a good idea. We'll certainly have you on again soon to talk about this more in depth, and we'll make a list of other cybersecurity people to get them on too in the future. That sounds like a great idea. All right, thank you very much for joining me on the show today, Peter, Brian, Niels.
All right, thanks for having us.
Thanks, Jacco.
Attention, North Korea portfolio professionals. Are you in need of more than just sloppy and spotty South Korean news coverage on the DPRK? If so, I present to you NK Pro. Born from the established news-gathering reputation of NK News, NK Pro leverages staff experience and top-notch technology to provide subscribers with superior knowledge and tools to achieve their goals. Expect daily analysis, exclusive tools, and a suite of research tools that cover everything from North Korean state media to the whereabouts of DPRK vessels and aircraft. How cool is that? In a world where the landscape of North Korea seems unknowable to many, NK Pro cuts through the noise and provides you with the quality, reliability, and timeliness you need. Stay ahead, stay informed, and master the landscape with NK Pro. Trust me, it's a game changer. Interested? Visit nknews.org/professionals to claim your free 30-day trial of NK Pro. Once again, that's nknews.org/professionals. Ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the end of our podcast episode for today. Our thanks go to Brian Betts and Alana Hill for facilitating this episode, and to our post-recording producer genius, Gabby Magnuson, who cuts out all the extraneous noises, awkward silences, bodily functions, and fixes the audio levels. Thank you, and listen again next time.